Hello there, everyone. This lecture is devoted to considering literacy at the preschool, primary, and intermediate levels. What kind of things are important to consider when you're setting out as a new teacher? This is an introduction to that. Obviously, some of you may have some background in this that maybe some of this is old hat to you, but I thought we would just start off with the basics. So here we go. Let's talk about the historical beginnings of emergent literacy. There's been a few different strands in history of education here. One of the strands for emergent literacy we call reading readiness. Well, what's that? Through most of the 20th century, school has been seen as a preparation ground for reading. Two basic views have taken hold about reading readiness, one being what they call the maturation view. This is the idea that the child's mental age is the determining factor, right? So here we have, the obvious idea that everybody's grouped in a specific grade, and in that grade, there's an age range that's this to that, and that's how we group kids, and then they follow along based on mental age or even physical age, basically as a sign of mental age, right? The maturation view. You might say that somebody's 12, but they're reading at a 7-year-old level or something like that, right? The other thing is the experience view, where we're prepping for reading. Our prepping for reading matters more than waiting for the right age. So we develop or cultivate auditory discrimination and memory. We take incremental steps towards learning. We use drills and practice routines. And we have pre-reading objectives here, to master skills prior to reading, like print awareness, as in letters, right? Linguistic awareness, as in sounds and rhymes. Directions up, down, inside, outside. Colors, same, different, as well as sensory motor skills like crawl, hop, skip. So this experience view is, what's afoot when we think of, I don't know how many of you, when you were kids, you watched Sesame Street, but Sesame Street is very much aligned with that, right? The idea that we're prepping kids for reading here. Not necessarily waiting for the right age, but, saying we're developing basic skills, practice routines, these sorts of things. And then emergent literacy. This is something that came up in the 1980s. And this movement challenges the reading readiness supposition that general cognitive skills transfer to reading. It suggests that it's not reasonable to point to a time when literacy begins. All right, you don't just start at this specific time to be literate. Kids are already talking, and that's a kind of literacy, right? They're already inventing rhymes and telling stories and conversing. Even without reading, we can find examples of listening skills, comprehension, vocabulary, etc., right? So all these things that are bulleted as our outcomes when we're teaching literacy, they precede the act of sitting down and reading a text, right? So emergent literacy questions that idea. This view also looks at or considers watching TV as a form of literacy, playing video games, being read to, and singing as forms of literacy. Currently, the reading readiness view is back in vogue with a vengeance because of political pressures to acquire skills. You'll see this in back to basics and traditional learning schools and some of the charter schools here in Alberta. This is very popular among parents who feel that, the public education system has gone, all soft and kids aren't learning anything and all this rubbish. So the assumption now seems to be that children lack experiences to get literature, and so we should focus on skills instead. Here's a chart out of a textbook. I'm trying to remember the name of the textbook right now. Oh my gosh, my brain is fried here. But it's by Flint. and it's from 2008. It's a good chart. I've included it here. I think that's a wonderful textbook. But you can see how Flint has organized, for instance, when you're thinking about planning emergent literacy experiences for children, what are some things that young children enjoy? And then associated with those things, what are some things that teachers can promote literacy using that hinge upon those things that children enjoy, and some examples of literacy engagements in the third column. So if you're thinking about, as you probably are right now as a Bachelor of Education student, what are some of the different ways into literacy for my students, emergent literacy experiences, things that I can craft, things that I can develop and practice in my classroom with my kids? Well, Flint will help you on your way. 3 major areas of literacy acquisition. So there's concepts of text. Do I understand what a text is? What are the parts of a text? Like what are the different bits that make up a text, right? Even understanding what is a book, which is kind of funny. But I mean, maybe now, especially with all the gadgets and everything, it's a less dumb question. Now, there's a very funny book. It's called It's a Book. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You can look for it on Amazon. It's a kid's book. It's got this little monkey who's learning about what books are, and all he's ever been exposed to is technology. And so concept of texts is something that may be a lot less second nature than what you suppose when you get kids in your classroom. Also concepts of words and concepts of letters and sounds. So this includes alphabet knowledge, right? Knowing your alphabet, beginning letters, capitals, lowercase. And phonemic awareness, being able to hear distinct sounds in words. Another handy little chart from Flint on concepts about print. So, again, maybe kids don't have books at home. Maybe they don't have anything, or maybe all their parents have because their parents don't read. They just have a TV and they have the computer and they have their little iPad, right? Maybe they've never seen a book. Seriously. Can you find the front cover? Can you find the back cover? What's the title? These sorts of things. So here are, a list of 22 little things that you can think to develop, and concepts about print, being able to recognize what these different aspects of reading are in a book. Okay? It's not to say that you couldn't do this with an iPad too. Of course you could. There's, capitals and small letters and periods and question marks there too, but, a book has a kind of a different feel to it. There's an ACAP scoring sheet here, so teachers can monitor the children's growing awareness of concepts about print at this earliest stage with simple reading or book exercises. So a typical CAP test usually takes about 10 minutes. The teacher reads a story while the child looks on. Then the child is asked to open the book, turn pages, and point to a particular print feature as the text is read. So you don't have to use CAP test booklets for this. Any book in your class will suffice. And here are some ways. This is out of a text by Tompkins, a very good text like Flint. Ways to encourage or develop knowledge of the letters of the alphabet. So routines that you can teach letters of the alphabet. So environmental print, right? You have food labels, toy traffic signs. These are environmental print, right? Alphabet books. I love those Graham Base Animalia books. Those are excellent. Magnetic letters, right? Letter stamps, alphabet charts, letter containers, letter frames, letter books and posters, letter sorts, dry erase boards, all different ways just to get kids using and familiar with the alphabet. And there's several stages of emergent spelling too that you'll see as a teacher. The first stage is just random marks. Here you have kids experimenting with pencil and paper, and then Later marks become more purposeful as kids begin to connect meaning to these marks. And you get what's called pre-phonemic. It's often a random string of letters that don't signify words, right? They're just fiddling around, drawing letters. And then you've got early phonemic. At the third stage, this is where they begin to use letters to represent sounds in words, usually consonants. So there on the right-hand side, you've got diner, run, right? A dinosaur running. And you've got the boy, he wrote his name Banner at the top of it. That's early phonemic. This here on the left, I found this. I dug this out of my closet when I was a little boy. I had a Mother Goose book. So you can see I was fiddle-farting around with words. It doesn't look like, this might be pre-phonemic though, rather, or early phonemic, I would say. Because it looks like I'm just fiddle-farting around, although it's funny, like S-A-U-L-T, like Sault Ste. Marie, but it's totally random. So it's random use of words. You can see I was trying to spell my name down there. I'm Sean, S-E-A-N. But that's not, sounding words out. That's just me. Someone told me that my name is spelt that way, so here I was practicing it. Letter naming is where you add vowels to spelling, which runs left to right. Right? They start to learn some of the rules here. So there's at the store, and then there's the tree, tree, right? Up top there, you can try to read that too. See if you can understand what the child has written. And then there's the transitional stage. Child can spell a majority of words with a mix of phonetic and conventional spelling. So I have 2 cats. I have 1 dog, and see, there's the he's drawn or she's drawn. Is it a she? No, it's a he. Sean drawn a dog there, and the rest of it. So you can see it's transitional, different spellings there. I just threw this in just to be confusing. Here's E. Cummings, right? He's a grown-up, wonderful, famous poet, right? Well, what is this? Well, if you received this from a student, what would that be? The Grasshopper poem. I have my kids in high school read that. Why is E. Cummings playing with spelling and text and fonts and language like this? What is he doing? Is this the mind of a grasshopper? Is this what it is like to be a grasshopper? What is this? There's ways of encouraging emergent reading and writing too. Where we have noticing environmental print like billboards, store signs, street signs, labels, posters, boxes, right? Bring all these things in. They're forms of literacy. Very important forms of literacy too, right? This is the stuff that you're going to use on a practical day-to-day basis. How about incorporating writing centers or storybook reading or socio-dramatic play settings, right? Imaginative play centers in which letters and literacy become part of the activity, like grocery stores. Maybe kids have a grocery list they make, right? Or post office or something like that, where they fill out they write a letter and they get it stamped and they take it away and that sort of thing. Although that's kind of old school, but you get my meaning. And the language experience approach, or the LEA, right, where a child tells you a story and you write out the story and read it back to the child. So you're kind of a scribe for the child. This is common practice in schools. Next thing I'd like you to consider is beginning readers and writers. So after that very early stage, here we have beginning readers and writers in the primary grades. So Flint speaks of 4 phases of literacy development. After phase 1, or the preschool age, here are some ideas for promoting literacy with your kindergarten age students. This is phase 2. So, here's Flint, some of the things kindergartners enjoy, some of the things linked to that you can do as a teacher to promote literacy, given that they like those things. And here's some examples of literacy engagements for the classroom. You can pause that slide and look through that, and maybe it'll give you some ideas as you're developing your own lesson plan designs, right? And there's the first grade. So what do first graders enjoy? What are some of the things that you can do to promote literacy as a teacher? And what are some examples of engagements for the classroom. And there's the second grade. Again, nice handy charts in Flint's textbook. Highly recommended to you. Second graders enjoy these things. Here's things that you can do as a teacher related to those things that they enjoy. Notice that the key here for Flint, the key for Tompkins too, is always thinking, what are the things that kids enjoy? I want them to enjoy reading. I want them to be ignited, excited about literacy. So how do I create things that tie back to that? And what are some examples of literacy engagements that I can use? Okay, so then we've got beginning readers and writers in the primary grades here. Unlike Flint, your Tompkins textbook speaks about 3 stages of literacy development among young children: emergent, beginning, and fluent. So you'll see this, right? Like, don't be alarmed if one textbook gives you 4 stages, another one gives you 3 stages, one other one gives you 5, like, whatever. I mean, just take it for what it is. They're guidelines. They're meant there to help you, They shift things around a little bit, but maybe the different organizational strategies of the different authors and textbooks will, give you some inkling or some ideas about how you can help kids with reading here and with writing, right, at this young age in the primary grades. Emergent readers and writers, beginning readers and writers, fluent readers and writers. What are different things that I can do at each one of those stages with regard to reading and writing in my classroom? Have a look at that chart from Tompkins and maybe you'll get some ideas from it. So with these 3 stages in mind, Tompkins next offers us some advice on what sorts of things we might do to meet the needs of children at each level of development. So here are some ideas about reading and writing, emergent, beginning, and fluent, at the fluent stages. And then, here's some other things, some typical instructional or routine practices that you can use to structure the literacy program within your own classroom. So you can find good YouTube demonstrations of what a morning message is, what shared reading is, what the LEA approach or language experience approach is. You find those demos and watch them. But generally, what's a morning message? Well, it's where the teacher writes a brief message on the board before the children arrive. Often it's a friendly letter about what will happen that day. Then the message is read aloud at the beginning of the school day, and the kids read it and count the letters and the words and the sentences. Maybe they pick out familiar letters and words, or words that follow a particular phonics pattern that they're familiar with, right? Maybe they use it in that, little magnet center that you've developed. Or maybe they pick out high-frequency words that they commonly see, or capital letters or punctuation marks, depending on their level of development. That's the morning message. And then shared reading. What's that? Well, it's where teachers use this method to read aloud books that are appropriate for the children's interest level, but a bit too hard for them to read themselves. So you're reading this to them. It's not something they could read themselves. So it's a high-interest book that you can read to them that they'll enjoy. You can incorporate mini lessons into your shared reading, along with activities for the kids to try. So Tompkins recommends using predictable books that use similar word patterns or repeated sentences and rhymes, etc. You'll find lots and lots of books that have repeated kind of patterns in them. You know who I really liked that way? My kids always loved was Robert Munsch. Robert Munsch's stories very often have these predictable patterns in them, don't they? And number 3, the LEA, or language experience approach. Children dictate words and sentences about their own experiences, and the teacher writes them down. The text they develop becomes the reading material. Because the words come from the kids, it's usually easier for them to read. See, so what are you doing? You're making a text for them to read, a little book for them to read. It's not a book that they go and find on the shelf. It's a book that's actually personalized to them. Pretty cool, eh? And they can even draw pictures with it. You can model how to set about writing words on a page for them, and you can drop in a few errors as practice to go back and proofread too, right? Then the students can create their own picture books with this text, or even make a collaborative book in which each child makes a page or two. You see that very often in schools. Good thing to try. And there's interactive writing. What's that? Well, this is like LEA, except rather than having the teacher write out the story, the children do it together as a group, sharing the pen. This method has the added benefit that the kids get to see their own production on the walls of the classroom or in the hall or wherever. It also ties in visual art or visual learning and expression as well. And then a fifth way of doing this, well, there's manuscript handwriting. So you give students a chance to practice letter formation. So in my day, this was called penmanship. If they practice good handwriting, they won't develop bad habits. Some children entering your classroom will likely need to be shown how to hold a pencil before they can begin to write. Research suggests that moving models are better than worksheets. That is, you should model how to make this or that letter, showing the motions of writing to them. And the worksheet on its own shows the shapes, and it may even include arrows to show which directions to move your pencil. But this isn't as good as actually seeing somebody do it. So you could do it yourself, or you could show like a little video off YouTube or something how to do it, right? A handwriting center is a valuable workstation in a primary classroom, and after letters have been modeled to children, they can quietly practice the movements while you're busy with other things. What about writing centers? Make sure, obviously, that you have a place with tables and chairs and writing supplies when you set up this center. Have the alphabet in both upper and lower case handy, as well as a crate or something where kids can store their work. When children are in this center, they can write and illustrate in journals, compile books, notes, and letters, and craft messages to one another on message boards and individual mailboxes even, right? Make it fun. Make it applicable. Make it something that they communicate with each other. Okay, so we're talking now about the beginning reader and the 4-resource model. Here we have a nice little set of cubes here. We've got code breaking, text participant, text user, and critical practices, the 4-resource model. You need all 4 of these in order to learn how to read well. Let's begin with code breaking. Code breaking, what is that? It's recognizing and using the alphabet, the sounds and words, spelling, conventions, and patterns. There's 2 basic ways to teach code breaking. You have the prescriptive approach and the integrated approach. The prescriptive approach means teaching intensively and systematically with explicit phonics instruction like basal readers. We talked about that last time. Also, the integrated approach. This is less systematic, less explicit. Instead, it uses real books with predictable language. Okay, so whereas the prescriptive approach is basal form, it's very structured based on kind of skills, right? The integrated approach, you're actually using real books, not these C-Dick run things, but you're actually using real books with predictable language. Okay, remember the importance of play when you're doing code breaking. Language, play, and rhymes. Encourage literacy by having kids make rhymes and try the alliterative use of words. Yanked out yards of yellow yak yet, right? Or something. I don't know, that's kind of gross. Use play to help teach phonemic blending, saying words slowly and putting sounds together, as well as phonemic segmentation, which is the opposite, right? Breaking words into individual sounds. So, here we have the electric company. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the electric company, but it was kind of like Sesame Street, except it was all to do with literacy and learning how to sound words out. So it's kind of fun. And I think you can actually access some of it on YouTube, and I know there's definitely old DVD recordings now of the entire, all the seasons. Work with word families in code breaking, right? So words that share the same rhyme pattern, that's the vowel plus the end sound sequence. This practice helps kids recognize all kinds of words just by noting the ending and changing the onset. That's the letter that precedes the vowel, see? So you can do that with these kind of tiles, can't you? And then alphabet knowledge, right? Try using an attendance booklet in which the children spell their names. You can watch their progress here Try using letter cards to encourage the children to make words. See how many you can make from the letters of another word, or lists of words. Provide a class poster, word wall, or perhaps take-home drill cards for high-frequency or sight words. You'll see this quite frequently in your classrooms, I imagine, during your practicums. You can find lists of the most commonly used words in your textbooks or online and introduce words from these lists slowly in your own classroom. So this is from Flint's textbook, and she actually got it from, or not Flint, sorry, this is from Tompkins, and she actually got it from another textbook by Prentice Hall. But you can see here, it's the 300 highest frequency words. You could add these onto your list in your own classroom as you go along, right? And the first 100 most frequently used words are flagged here with a little asterisk or a dot there. Okay, and then you've got examples of words commonly introduced in kindergarten in grade 1 here, right? Much smaller list, but you can see how it's all alphabetized, right? Or you've got it above there, Fry's 24 most frequently used words for kindergartners. So here you're developing a sense of sight words. Every time you see these, you should be able to just see them and eyeball them and say, oh, that's that word, rather than having to sound it out, right? That's another way that we read. We don't sound everything out that we read, do we? We recognize a word immediately as a whole unit. And you can use word wall lists for older students as well as for younger ones, right? So make it as complex or as simple as according to your needs in your classroom. Then you got mini lessons for code breaking, right? So the Flint recommends 5 basic strategies using the onset and meaning to figure out a word in a sentence, like context, using context, sound out the word by elongating its sounds, and use your pattern knowledge to figure out unfamiliar words. So, for example, sing might be similar to student, but sting, unfamiliar, right? Sing might be a word that a kid recognizes, but the word sting, they might not know what that is. So it looks like this other word, but this is part of learning. Can you associate one word? Does it kind of look like another word that you're familiar with? Different meanings, but similar sound, right? Understanding variation in complex letter-sound relations. So here we have words with hard or soft letters, diphthongs or digraphs. And then 5, voice print matching. Look at a word at the same time as you say it. Different ways to help kids learn how to read that you can offer them if you're sitting with them, or if you're teaching them how to read. Say you're doing a read aloud or something like that. Additional ideas for teaching word recognition here. Introduce words in context. Use a familiar book, or try teaching with pictures or objects. Examples: show a wrapped gift with tags to teach about for, as opposed to for, F-O-U-R, and from, right? Have children chant and clap the words. For, F-O-R, from, F-R-O-M, right? Something like that. Have kids practice reading and writing the words, creating sentences using high-frequency words on sentence strips, and read them to each other. Then maybe cut the words apart and rearrange or add words from around the room. Lots of different ways to teach word recognition. Still on code breaking here, what about phonic analysis, right? When you're talking about word identification. Basically sounding words out with phonic skills and knowledge of rules of language, right? You're sounding words out. And then decoding by analogy. This is handy when students run across a word that they don't know, but they know another word that looks like it. So fright is unknown, but they may know the IGHT phonogram, right? So try using authentic children's books that make use of phonograms, patterns that teach word families. So like if you give a moose a muffin, I don't know if you've ever seen that book, or it comes with a CD typically too. So you can even show the book and then play the CD with it or something like that. It teaches phonograms, or also in the tall, tall grass. This is another one that teaches words versus words. Still in code breaking, what about syllabic analysis? In the middle grades, right, so a bit higher, in the middle grades, students learn to divide words into syllables, to spell longer words like biodegradable, admonition, and unforgettable, right? So here are the rules for dividing syllables, and here are some examples of how to divide syllables. So you can try that. That can help kids learn the different aspects of words and learn how to spell and learn what words are. Okay, then there's also what we call morphemic analysis. Well, what the heck is that? You teach kids to look for the root word and to be able to spot any affixes. So what's an affix? It's a suffix, something that comes after the root, or a prefix, something that comes before the root. A root word is a morpheme, and all words with that root have a related meaning. So affixes also give us some information on the meaning of a word, how it's being affected. All right. So here's a list. Here's a nice list that is from Tompkins. There's your root. That's the language it's derived from. There's the meaning of it, and then sample words related to it. Right? You can see, kids, if they learn these, all these words are somehow related to each other. And that'll help them, right? If you run across a word that's really weird, but then something about it's similar, then they learn, oh, I can kind of figure a word out because it kind of looks like this other word. And lots of times, not always, but lots of times, that's an indication that it's somehow associated. Okay, so here's some more common affixes, right, in Latin, Greek, and English. You can pause and look at that at your own time. Again, this is from Tompkins, and Tompkins took this from another text. Here's a handy reading strategies chart for you. So here we have phonic analysis, decoding by analogy, syllabic analysis, and morphemic analysis. We have descriptions of what each of those are and some examples of each of those things. As you're teaching, make use of these different strategies to help kids learn. They shouldn't just know the one kind, they should know many different kinds. Yeah, so students should be able to access each of these different strategies. If they only know how to decode by analogy, that might not help them as much as also knowing how to do syllabic analysis or morphemic analysis or phonic analysis. Moving on here then, from code breaking to text participation. If you're a text participant, what does that mean? It involves activating students' prior knowledge and drawing upon their experiences as these relate to whatever they are reading, right? So students are going to understand and appreciate whatever it is they're reading if they can make relations between it and themselves. And part of this is, predicting what will happen next in a text, organizing and sequencing events in the text, asking questions that arise from thinking about a text, summarizing what happens, visualizing a story. You can even have it where, for instance, you might take a text, events in a text, have a kind of a visual for, major events in a story and mix them up and then say, okay, well, let's rearrange these in the proper order. Can you do that, right? And can you make the story make sense? So you can encourage students to participate in text by reading and writing their own texts, of course. Also, you can read a text to children and have them relate it to their own lives in a discussion or sharing or art. You can have students look through a book at the pictures before they read it, like a picture walk, right? Picture walk, what is that? That's where you have a book. Before you even begin reading it, you look at the pictures in the book. Well, what do you think's happening here? Okay, well, what about next? What about next? And you get the kids to kind of tell a story about the book that they are set about to read, and it kind of gives them a chance to predict what might happen in the story before they actually read it, and then they can test that and see how accurately even the pictures help them cipher things. I've actually had a friend of ours, a a teacher friend with very, very much experience. She told me how one of her frustrations when she sends books home for her students in kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, the lower grades there, she wants them to do a home reading program. One of her frustrations is that particularly she found with students from other parts of the world where families are from other countries, they're opposed to allowing the children to look at the pictures to help them decipher whatever it is that they're learning. But it's a storybook, it's for kids, and the parents sometimes will actually cover up the pictures and force the child to read it without the pictures. And our teacher friend says, no, absolutely not. This is very important. This is one of the strategies that kids have to learn how to read, is being able to look at the pictures above or below the text, and then that helps them decode or cipher out what the meaning of the text is. So these things sometimes have to be explained to parents as well. Like if you're going to have a home reading program, you have to in some way inform or educate parents sometimes about good reading practices. Also, you can try literature webbing, where you, the teacher, write or draw a story event, the story's events on cards, mix them all up, and then the children try to predict the order of events or unscramble them. I talked about that earlier. And you can also have children try closing their eyes and imagining while the story is read to them. This also works for when they write their own stories. Then we have the third block here, which is being a text user. So children should see how literacy, reading, and writing, these things are everywhere, and they're used for all sorts of different things and purposes. So there's fiction, there's non-fiction, magazines, brochures, maps, road signs. These are all forms of literacy, and they all have different uses, right? And then the fourth aspect here is thinking critically about texts. Again, if you can, each of these four blocks, if you can employ each of these four building blocks in your literacy practices in your classroom, then you're going to be doing great as a teacher. What is thinking critically about text? It's trying to get the kids thinking about issues of fairness and justice, of right and wrong, and the things that they read. Developing within them a critical attitude early on in the literacy that is that has them question texts or take up the questions of texts. So next thing I'd like you to consider here is reader-writer workshops for beginning readers. Here we consider the importance of creating a routine, a habit, or an atmosphere for workshops. If you want to have workshops, you have to develop certain structures and routines that make those practices habitual. They get them in the habit of thinking in this way and interacting with literacy in this way. So you need good classroom management, behavior, habits, attitudes, and expectations have to be suitable for such workshops. And also, it'll help you be prepared and organized too. It eases your own stresses. So, if you have it set up so that you can actually have such workshops, in a way, the students become more independent, and that allows you to move about through the classroom, being less the center stage and more along the sideline and dealing with individual students or small groups of students, right? There's great benefit in reader-writer workshops. Structures that work well in primary grade classrooms: read aloud favorite stories as well as new ones. Reading aloud is very important for young kids. And also mini lessons that introduce or remind students of specific strategies. See, everybody or many of you are using sounding it out, but what about looking to the meaning of a word that you don't know in relation to things that preceded it? Can you do that? Or what about this particular sentence? What would make sense as a word in this sentence where it's located syntactically in this sentence, right? Something like that. Also, conduct shared or guided reading events where the teacher reads aloud to kids, breaking in and out, talking about the book, connections, and reading strategies. Also, echo reading. That's where teacher reads aloud and then the children repeat the same line. And choral reading, where children read aloud at the same time as the teacher. And then you've got also things like, where you provide opportunities for the students to write in their notebooks, and you offer lots of literature discussions. That's very important. Being able to talk about the stories that you're reading, that they're reading, that each of them are reading separately or in groups. Implement independent reading and partner reading. You shouldn't always be on your own. How can you partner kids effectively, right? Do you want to partner, say, a reader who lacks a certain amount of confidence, maybe, with a younger reader, right, who with that particular reader, he becomes the kind of expert, whereas maybe in the classroom he or she might feel not ordinarily like an expert. Here you have where partner reading can actually empower a student who is struggling with reading. All right, so and then you can have reading conferences so you can see how each child is doing, right? If you have it set up, reader-writer workshops, you've set it up, you have structures in place that allow you the freedom to then call kids out and deal with them one-on-one. And you take time for yourself to reflect on how things are going too. This is why these structures can be very valuable. Some examples of literacy center activities you might try, right? Rather than have all rows and columns in your classroom where it's all very direct instruction, why not set up literacy centers? You can have a bag of story center, a clipboard center, a game center, a library center, a listening center, a making words center, a messages, poetry frames, reading the room, research, story reenactment, word sorts. There's long lists of different things that you could do with kids, for kids. Set up literacy centers in your classroom. Every one of them is a different way into literacy, but they're all good practices. Other important elements of reading or writing in workshops with primary school students. Independent student writing time. We talk about independent reading time. What about writing time? Where independent writing time lets kids try out unfamiliar words and structures, right? You start off by focusing mostly on personal narratives, right? Write about your family, write about your life experiences, write about a time when this happened or a time when you saw that. They can include drawings along with what they write. Children can share what they write with others in an author's chair, right? Everybody gathers around and the child stands there or sits in a chair and gets to tell the story of their life or the story of their family or something that they've written there. And the focus isn't on spelling or correctness, but taking risks in their work and trying out new forms and ideas. You don't want to traumatize kids by making it sound like, well, everything has to be perfect or else it's no good. You don't need that. You want to get them so that they're just learning how to write and learning how to express themselves. And then writing conferences and record keeping. Well, it's important to meet with each child whenever you're able to see how each is doing and to figure out what might help each one of them improve his or her literacy. So you can use what you learn in these short conferences to develop mini lessons. If you see trends in the classroom, right? If there's a lot of kids that are having this one particular issue, maybe you want to get that group of kids together and deal with that in a mini lesson. Or maybe it's classroom wide. Maybe you want to have a bigger, whole class discussion about it. But when you meet a child, try to stick with maybe just one thing that each could work on, rather than picking out a whole boatload of things that might need addressed, right? Maybe there are a whole boatload, but let's just pick one thing. Take notes as you conference, right? There's a set of anecdotal notes. See that? Just take notes. You have each kid's name in the block there. These will help you make the best assessments to help each child. In your notes, you can remark on where each child is in the stream of things, what each is doing, as well as any strategies you might have recommended. Here's an example, right, of a daily assessment sheet for reading workshops. It's in a nice assessment tool. There's the date and Talk about, what you saw, what you observed, the strategies you offered, if there's a mini lesson you might do, that sort of thing. Daily conference sheet. Here's an example of a more involved or intricate student conference form, right? You can look at that and see whether something like that might be valuable for your classroom. And, how will you organize your day for literacy development, right? Here's an example of, a morning till noon kind of a structure that, is workable for literacy development, where you have, the different time schedules in there, where you're going to do different kinds of activities, different kinds of things. There's descriptions of the different activities. You can pause that and look at it at your own time. Yeah, what about intermediate or accomplished readers, right? We've been talking about, beginner readers. What about intermediate and accomplished readers, say through, grades 3 to 6? Here's a chart from Flint's 2008 book on literacy. You can read this on your own time. Third graders, these are the sorts of things that they enjoy. These are the different things that you can do as a teacher to promote literacy related to each of those things that they enjoy. And here's some examples of things that you can do. Okay, so you can pause that and look at that at your own time. And here's for grades 4 to 6, right, as well, from Flint. There's 6th grade right there. Working on fluency in grades 3 to 6. Well, what's fluency? Again, we talked about this in an earlier lecture, but it relates to speed, accuracy, and proper expression. So we can read well aloud, but not necessarily have much of a clue about what we've just read, right? So remember that fluency doesn't mean the same thing as comprehension. That's a different kettle of fish altogether. So you'd need different kinds of questions, different kinds of assessments to measure for comprehension. Fluency isn't fixed or static, but changes depending on what we're reading and how we're feeling. Are the words hard or easy? Have we read this book before or had practice with it? Does this text bore you to death? How have you been feeling lately? How's your attention span today? All those things affect our fluency. Some texts appear more well suited to work on fluency than others. So books that are easier to read, have long sentences, use authentic natural language with lots of high frequency words are better than basal or decodable texts, for instance. And how can you help your students with fluency? Well, number one, repeated readings. Have students practice reading the same passage over and over again. Maybe a speech or a poem, and you give feedback each time on how they're doing. And through practice, they'll become more fluent with that passage. You can also record their voices so they can hear themselves practicing reading with clarity, smoothness, phrasing, and intonation, right? Second thing you can do is choral reading. So where all the students read aloud together as part of a larger group. This system lets less fluent readers read aloud without the fear of having to read alone in front of everyone else. See? And there's partner reading, where two students are paired to read a text aloud. The less fluent one hears a model of fluent reading, while the more fluent one helps with word recognition and feedback. Teaching is also a good way to learn, right? And then there's readers' theater. Readers rehearse and perform the story they're reading. They choose one that's rich in dialogue. They don't memorize the text, but they become very familiar with it by practice. You can find examples of readers' theater in action on YouTube. Independent reading time. This is extended free silent reading time. We call it SSR, sustained silent reading, right? These practices, sustained silent reading, is great in high school too. Read alouds offer students opportunities to hear fluent reading. You as a teacher might model how to do it. You might play a recording of a poet reading his or her poem to give a sense of how we read poetry even. Okay, here's some ideas for mini lessons with intermediate accomplished readers and writers, right? So there's reading lessons and writing lessons. Different ideas for mini lessons. You can pause that and have a look at different things that you might try. What should you, the teacher, be doing during reading conferences? You're going to have conferences with the kids to see how they're reading. Well, collaborate, right? Help with difficult words and ideas. Demonstrate. Show how to use those strategies you're recommending, right? So here's an idea of a strategy that you could use, because I see that you're focusing a lot on sounding words out, but not all words can be sounded out. So try this. Let me show you how to do that. Here's some examples. Let's do it together, right? And then you observe, or you kid watch, you take notes on miscues, on actions, behaviors during the conferences. And you ask yourself, is the student excited to read or share what he or she is reading? Did the student spend too long on one page or struggle too much with decoding? Was the student able to retell the story in detail, or was there only a general gloss of the story? When asked, does the student think this book is too easy, too hard, confusing, or just about right? Is the student taking risks with new books, right? These are the kind of questions you would ask when you're in a conference, a one-on-one conference with a student. So some components of a balanced literacy approach. This is from Tompkins. She breaks it down into reading, phonics, reading and writing strategies, vocabulary comprehension. These are different components that you want to include in your own literacy teaching in your classroom. You can pause the slide and look at that on your own time. And here are some pros and cons of different sorts of reading arrangements in your classroom. So, independent reading is really good. It has its strengths, but it also has limitations, as does buddy reading, as does guided reading or shared reading or reading aloud to students. So probably the best way is to offer a mixture of these different things, not to rely on any one of them all the time, but to allow a mixture, and then the strengths and the limitations kind of even each other out. Okay, so that's the end of this lecture. Hope it was helpful for you. Thank you for listening.